The Glowpad is perhaps one of the least remarkable creatures in Qud. Somewhere between flora and fauna, they spend their lives doing little more than basking in the sun, nestled between the water vines of the salt marsh. But what if a Glowpad could do more, could be more? This is the story of one such Glowpad, a Glowpad who aspired to conquer the land of Qud. Even beginning this challenge raises a few questions, such as, how do we even play as a Glowpad? While I could just use wishes to swap bodies with one as soon as I spawn in, I don't think that's very interesting. And it also wouldn't work, as there's a bit of preparation we need to do just to begin playing as a Glowpad. For our starting character, we choose, somewhat fittingly, a water vine farmer. We take the Dominate mutation, which will let us take control of another creature. Now, some Qud experts out there may already notice a problem with this idea, but we'll get to that. The rest of our starting stats aren't too important, I just choose stats for survivability and evasion. We start in Joppa and immediately leave town. We'll be returning later, but for now, we're on a quest to find a specific item. You see, Glowpads can't move outside of water, and if dominated by a player, they can't move at all, even in water. If you attempt to move in any direction, the game will instead give you a pop-up reminding you that you are not a mobile creature. And moving is kind of important for progressing. There are, however, some ways to move around as an immobile creature, and one convenient way is by using the mechanical wings, a piece of back equipment that grants flight. Finding specific gear is usually difficult in Qud, as item spawns are heavily randomized. The wings are one of the few items that have a guaranteed spawn, in the center tile of a random salt marsh parasang. So we start searching every parasang. It might sound like an arduous task at first, but you can quickly travel to the center of a new parasang when entering it for the first time from the world map. This is the reason I started with a water vine farmer, as they start with the salt marsh lore, which greatly reduces our chances of getting lost. The downside to exploring so many tiles is that we will inevitably be gaining experience. When happening upon new locations and in instances where we have to fight our way out, XP will be lost, as it can only be rewarded to one character. To minimize the damage and to leave the world as untouched as possible for our Glowpad, I'm ignoring any location pop-ups, and I'm running from any fights, which are mostly crocs and snapjaws. I simply release sleep gas and sprint away. I'm also opting not to look for or collect any other loot. I want to save it all for the Glowpad. Which parasang the wings spawn in is up to RNG, and this time I have to check almost every single one, but eventually we find our wings, watched over by a pair of Glowpads. There is one final step though. The wings are unidentified and broken. And since we can't ID broken equipment, we'll have to not only take it back to Joppa to get it fixed, but waste even more extremely precious XP from Argive, as he won't offer his repair services unless we do. The problem is we need at least 2 artifacts to complete the quest, and the only artifact we have is the wings, which we need. So I first check a secluded chest in town, but it contains no artifacts. The other chests are too risky to check without angering the entire town, but we can get a free trinket from the Mechanimous Pilgrim here. I then check in with Tam, the village trader. As a water vine farmer, we start with the farmer's token, which can be used for trading, which is good since we literally used all of our water to keep hydrated while searching the marshes. I buy Tam's cheapest weird artifact, but it can't be turned in, so I ID it, and it turns out to be a Fix-It spray foam. This is actually pretty lucky, as now I can use it to fix the wings myself, which means I can ID it myself and not have to pay Argive's XP fee. With mechanical wings in hand, we're off to find a Glowpad, and what better than the one that was hanging out right next to where we found the wings. Let's dominate. To make the domination permanent, our original body has to die while dominating. First, we beat the crap out of ourselves until we're low HP. This will make it easier for our Glowpad self to finish us off in one hit. If our original body doesn't die in a one-hit KO, then the domination will simply end. This is also why I chose Precognition as my other starting mutation, to not accidentally kill myself when trying to hit 1 HP. When we're an inch away from death, we activate Dominate and... yeah, so unfortunately Glowpads can't be dominated. Their mind is too simple. So if we want to properly continue, we will in fact have to use a wish command. Without it, the run would end here, and that's no fun, but hopefully the sin of using a wish in a challenge run can be forgiven, just a bit, for the fact that I so far have done everything else up to this point as if domination would have worked. It is only at this critical point that it has failed us. Anyway, swapping Dominate with the Swap Wish, we're a Glowpad now. A Glowpad with a pair of wings, quite possibly the most exhilarating thing any Glowpad has ever experienced. Before we really get into it, let's break down the stats of a Glowpad. Glowpads start at level 1 and have a base armor value of 0 and a dodge value of -10. Ouch, literally. Their stats are quite low, but have a disproportionately high agility and ego. Ego is, in fact, one of the most important stats in Qud, especially mid to late game. They also have a natural 25% resistance to heat, and start with no skills and essentially no mutations, as Gills doesn't do anything. They have a natural weapon in their bite attack, which acts as a short blade which synergizes with agility. Possibly their best feature is the large pool of 50 HP at level 1. This scales as level increases, which helps pad out the subpar toughness a bit. And though they're referred to by different names, Glowpads have all the same limbs as a normal humanoid, with one exception: feet. Glowpads instead have roots, which are very different. There's only one piece of gear in the entire game that can be equipped to roots, and it's not very good. This also means that we can never equip boots, at least it would seem so. But even if we had feet, Glowpads appear to be hard-coded to be immobile creatures, at least that's the conclusion I've drawn from testing things like hooks for feet and extra chimera limbs. And finally, Glowpads, of course, glow slightly. Now some might be wondering about a certain oddly hued Glowpad. Well, that one is significantly stronger, so maybe we'll compare that run with this one some other time. For now, we pick up the gear from our former self and head back to Joppa. Hopefully, no one in town finds it weird that a traveler came by just recently, repaired a pair of mechanical wings, left, and a short time later, a Glowpad comes to town, flying around in the same mechanical wings, and wearing the adventurer's bloodstained clothes and gear. No, nothing out of the ordinary here, just another day in Qud. And now the run more or less officially begins. I talk to the rest of the NPCs, getting quests and checking vendors, though I can't really afford anything. I check out another nearby village in hopes for some quests. I have the fortune of happening on a group of Snapjaws, and I stop by Joppa and trade in some of their loot for a carbide dagger, as well as learn the short blade expertise skill. I also set our main weapon to be our main hand dagger, and though this is a nice little upgrade, our pin is still sitting at a sad 0. Basically, it means our attacks miss a lot. I decide that our main weapon skills should indeed be short blades, mostly because it scales well with our highest melee stat, agility, but also because I find the image of a Glowpad flying around stabbing things with little knives hilariously adorable. Around this time, we really start to notice the shortcomings of the mechanical wings and what makes playing like this very annoying. The wings have a 5% chance to fall to the ground each turn. It feels more like 75%. They fail on average what seems like at least 3 times per screen. That perhaps wouldn't be so bad if there wasn't also a cooldown before activating them again. So each time the wings fall, I have to tap the wait button, then the activate wings button, then the walk button, then the direction button. It's incredibly annoying to go through all that, then take 1 or 2 steps only to fall again and have to do it all over. Using the mouse can reduce button presses a bit, but it's clunky either way, and if you fall while running from enemies, as I often have to as I'm one of the weakest creatures in all of Qud, there is really nothing you can do. You have to wait for the cooldown before you can move again, which means attempting to fight. I'm not sure if the footage can truly depict the pain of having the mechanical wings to be your only source of movement. It really is a nightmare. There's also the fact that they have a small chance to break. At this point in the game, Fix-It Spray is rare and our intelligence is way too low to learn repair anytime soon. If they break, there is no way to repair them, there's nothing we can do, run over, which is one of the many reasons this is on roleplay mode. I'd rather reload a save than restart the run over and over. I'm not even sure it would be possible to do this otherwise unless you get extremely lucky early on. There are upsides to the wings though, in addition to even making this run possible, which I guess is a good one. As long as you're not lost, you can fly to the world map to escape dangerous encounters. Surrounded by enemies you can't defeat, just nope out. Although you also have to not be famished to fly to the world map, and at this stage, we don't even know how to make our own camp, so we're at the mercy of pre-made campsites and ovens. The wings also grant the swoop ability to fight while flying, but non-flying enemies tend to stay out of melee range, so I usually find it easier to just land and fight in one spot. At level 5, we get to buy our first mutation. The choices are all pretty good, but since we start with such a high ego, I decide to take Beguile and immediately recruit a Mechanimous Pilgrim. With a new ally and a bit better gear, I'm feeling confident enough to poke into the desert, and though our new friend swiftly dies, I'm able to recruit the one who bested him. This chitinous puma is a much better companion, taking care of most enemies with ease. As badly as I want to buy the wayfaring skill to make campsites, our intelligence is too low, so I spend my first attribute point on intelligence, as we'll need it for other stuff as well later. For now, I just take multi-weapon fighting, which gives us the flurry ability. I chance rushing to the 6-day stilt and arrive without issue, looking around to see what merchants we have, and in hopes to find a bit of Reshef lore, which I do. We have 3 Bookbinders, which is always nice to see, and 4 Gunsmiths, which I use to stock up on lead slugs for a nice XP grinding tactic soon. We don't have much for Sheba in the way of books, but after turning in Reshef lore to Tazapur, we reach level 9 and can buy a new mutation. Again, it's a tough choice, but seeing as how our base attributes are so low, I'm inclined to take double muscle, as it increases our strength, especially since all of our level up points are going into intelligence at the moment. The 15% chance to daze is also nice, especially with multi-weapon fighting. Our options are still limited. I head back into the desert to just wander around the surface. We're looking for XP in the form of packs of raiders and books that we find in ruins, and of course any good gear that we might find along the way. There's not much to say here really. This is usually how I grind early levels in my playthroughs, though our convoluted method of locomotion makes this particularly painstaking. We find a fungal grove in the desert and can finally put those lead slugs to good use. You see, like a Glowpad without wings, these brooding spore puffs are immobile. We can freely shoot at them until they die for big XP, and as long as we keep at least a 1-tile distance from them, their fungal spores will never reach us. Yes, it's a little cheesy, but I'll take all the help I can get for this run. I tell my puma to stay behind while I clear out the surrounding tiles, and after clearing the grove of spore puffs and heading back to the stilt to turn in books, we gain enough levels to buy our next mutation point. We get some good offensive options, but Sunder Mind is the clear winner for me, meaning we can now take on stronger enemies, such as the Dawn Glider, with great range. I find an Electro Bow from a roaming Dromad. You can always tell, even if it's unidentified, by the yellow color of the artifact. Shortly after, we also find a Rust Bog, a somewhat rare zone, which often spawns good loot. Here we find a Solar Cell for the Electro Bow, one of my favorite early game combos, great for clearing entire raider packs in the desert. We also find a Vibro Dagger, which isn't great, but even unpowered, it's still an upgrade for our offhand weapon. We don't find much else until we happen upon another Rust Bog, which gives us 2 Gaslight Flysa, one already equipped with a Solar Cell. This is kind of a huge damage upgrade actually, even though they're not short blades, the pin is great. After trickling in the XP, we finally get to choose a new mutation, and while I love Clairvoyance, it's more of a quality of life mutation, and while more agility could also be good, I think Two-Headed will be better in the long run. While I'm in town, I drop a chest to store some of my valuables, as our carry weight isn't great thanks to our low strength. I also get the Bay Law quest from Luliheart, which I forgot to take the first time around. Luliheart is admired by mechanimists, so by water bonding with them and the High Priest in town, I can learn Proselytize, which will be extremely important soon, and we can save on spending the skill points for it. Also, for now, we can use it to gain a second follower. I do a few village quests, but don't really get anything useful. After literally hours of grinding, I can finally buy Wayfaring. I never thought I'd be so excited for the Make Camp ability, something that most playthroughs start the game with by default. We still get lost a lot because I can't afford the intelligence for Salt Dunes lore, but when we do get lost, we don't have to wander around the map, again with the incredibly awkward controls, until we find a campfire. We can now just make our own as soon as we regain our bearings, again, and head straight back to the world map. Points of interest are much faster to find through overworld pop-ups, especially with the Precinct Navigator that I found. This does allow me to farm ruins a bit faster, mostly netting more books for a bit more XP, but it's honestly not enough. If we're going to get anywhere, we're going to need much better equipment, which is just too rare in the desert. It seems like the only way we're going to make it is by traveling to the jungle. The jungle is incredibly dangerous, but I have a plan. As long as we can beguile the goat folk, and always have at least one fighting with us, we might be able to survive. So I carefully venture into the jungle and beguile the first goat folk I see. I also splurge on skill points a bit to learn Berate to make Proselytize easier, but all of my attempts still fail. Beguile, however, always seems to work. I stop at Kyakukya, but I have to go in the back way as Crowsong doesn't like Glowpads. The first goat folk village I encounter is without my new goat companion, who had just been killed by Crowsong. I'm able to beguile the first goat I see though. After that, we carefully take out the other goat folk, trying to take them one at a time. I'm also able to proselytize another one of them, so now I have 2 goat folk followers. I decide to make this my jungle base, as I can't really set up in Kyakukya, so I dump all the carbide gear the ghosts have been dropping into a chest and head out to find more villages. After a bit, I head back to Kyakukya to find that there's a high-tier Dromad trader there. That will definitely come in handy later. I scrounge up enough XP for another mutation point. Psychometry is nice, but again it's more of a quality of life mutation, so I take time dilation instead for an AoE defensive option. After spending a while in the jungle, we get some gear upgrades and a ton of stuff to sell, but due to having to play super carefully, progress is very slow. Skimming the desert for ruins with books is still much faster for XP, and now even more so that we've geared up a bit. But we don't get much loot. Along the way, I crack into the Tinker Tree so we can at least start accumulating bits. You may have noticed that I haven't done any underground exploration yet, and that's because you can't fly underground. Take one step into a cave and the game immediately stops your flight. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't move at all in caves. One idea would be to blast ourselves around using explosive knockback, or bring a follower and tell them to stand in the tile in front of us, then move into them. In this event, the game will in fact let the two characters swap places, so very painfully, we could move forward. Of course, those are silly ideas that I would never use. The real way would be to use something like teleportation. This would require us getting the mutation, which is possible we'll never even see, or some extremely rare specific items. But even if we can move ourselves about down below, there's another issue. As an immobile creature, we can't use stairs. If we're not in a flying state, the game will not let us use stairs. We can create up and down stairs with burrowing claws, which we can temporarily gain using a skulk injector. But we can't use those stairs because again, we're not a mobile creature. So for now, if we take any stair, even one stratum down, we're basically stuck. The best we could do is recoil out, assuming we can clear the area of any hostiles. The situation might seem dire at first, but I have come up with a strategy. In theory, it should work. I don't want to spoil it just yet, but it does rely on specific and rare items, which are hard to get when you're limited to the surface and can't go any further than the jungle. We need vendors. Good ones. We've already found one, the Dromad in Kyakukya. There are two other guaranteed high-tier traders across the jungle, a bit of a dangerous journey, but we only have to make it once, as there are recoilers waiting for us once we get there. There's another high-tier Dromad at Yid Freehold, but I actually do have to use the follower move and swap trick here to get to Bep and Tilly, who are underground. It's too early to think about clone farming, but at level 21, with an ego mod of +4 and wearing a +1 ego hat that I found, which raises our ego mod to +5, we're just barely able to proselytize some of the Stiltground vendors, though it might take a few attempts. Once proselytized, vendor NPCs become a follower and you can take anything from their inventory for free. The Bookbinders are most important, as we can trade their books for XP, but others, such as the Schematics Drafter and Ichor Merchants, are also good. So I take some time to round them all up near the Stiltground entrance, so we don't have to walk around the map every time, which, in case you forgot, is an absolute nightmare when using the mechanical wings. To my surprise, I'm also able to proselytize Ural, who is great for mid-tier general items, and I can move them over next to the Dromad for less moving around. Also, if you're wondering about the Crowsong problem, I lured them out of town, then recoiled back, so they're effectively gone out searching for me. And while I was in Kyakukya, I talked to that high-tier Dromad, and he is offering 2 flawless Crysteel daggers. It's a pretty steep price, but we can afford it. Sadly, we're still a ways off from being able to proselytize this guy. I also round up all the Stiltground chefs for a chance at drops of nectar, and take the meal preparation skill to utilize it. This rare food item has a 1 in 4 chance to permanently add +1 to all attributes, which, as you can imagine, would be great at this point. Sadly, I never get it to proc once in the entire run. At this point, I'm checking in on the Stilt often to get some free books from Bookbinders as a reliable stream of XP. After turning in some Reshef lore and reaching level 24, we get our 6th mutation. I'm not too excited about any of these, so I just take the passive Heightened Hearing to keep my abilities bar less cluttered. I do, however, get to rapidly advance Double Muscled, which gives me a nice strength boost. 1 level later, and I can successfully proselytize Sixshrew and Bep, so I decide to relocate them to Kyakukya, so now we have most of our high-level vendors in one spot. For our next mutation, we choose Photosynthetic Skin, which feels right for a Glowpad, though this would have been nice earlier as it makes making camp unnecessary. By this point, I have found a few items that will make things much better, but we still need Tinker 2, which is 5 attribute points away, which means we might have to grind to at least level 42. Out of desperation for attribute points, I start collecting all the canned Havidal and wild rice I see and cooking with it, as they have a chance to give attribute points, but no such luck. At level 30, we can buy Tinker 1, but it's not much help. We need Tinker 2. We can at least take Repair, so I can finally stop reloading when my wings break. We can also take almost all of the wayfaring skills as they're cheap and we don't have much else to spend points on. This actually makes goat farming a little more reasonable, as our chance of getting lost is now negligible and we can roam around the jungle for village pop-ups. Not to mention that we're pretty well geared up by now. I even get my first set of Zetachrome gear, the gauntlets. At this level though, goat folk no longer give XP from kills, so we have to go into the deep jungle. I very carefully look for goat folk haunt pop-ups. These have the Clippeth, which give a decent amount of XP and usually drop good loot. They seem susceptible to Sundermind, so overall scary but doable. At this point, I'm ready to bunker down and spend the hours grinding away for gear and XP, but then something game-changing happened. I find this crazy village in the deep jungle. Not even sure what's going on here, but they have like 50 drams of cloning draft just sitting around, so of course I take it. This is a crazy unexpected turn of events. I honestly didn't think we'd be able to do this until much later, as I've been having terrible luck finding even 1 dram so far, but as soon as I find this, I rush back to the stilt grounds for some vendor cloning. The basic idea is pour cloning draft on an NPC, which will create a clone of them. They spawn with nothing, but if you clone a vendor, leave and come back, they'll reset their inventory and will sell to you just like a normal vendor. The best part is if you only make clones from the original, then proselytize the original, they all become proselytized followers, and you can take all of their items for free. For now, I focus on Bookbinders because I need those levels. Also, I'd like to point out how difficult it is to actually get them to stand in a line like this. Anyway, how do we do for our first batch? 128 books. 3 levels. Nice. But what's even nicer is the mutation we get. Domination. Literally one of the best things we could possibly get for this run. But we'll put that on the back burner for now. My goal is Tinker 2. So I do a few more rounds of book farming. Along the way, we get 4 more mutation points, though there's really only a few mutations that I would really want, and our Psychic Glimmer is starting to rise a bit. I go ahead and chance it, and we get, I can't even believe it, Precognition. One of the best mutations in the game, and one of the ones you would probably most want with Domination. After all of these hours of grinding and abusing my hands just to move in a straight line, I gotta say this insane luck feels well deserved. And it's about to get even better. We finally hit level 42, actually overshoot into 43, and can finally take Tinker 2. This opens up a lot of stuff, but there's only one thing on my mind, the anti-grav boots. Now you may recall that I mentioned Glowpads don't have feet and thus can't wear boots. Thankfully, we don't have to wear them on our feet. Using a strong magnet, we can magnetize the boots, allowing them to float in your nearby slot. This grants us their benefits, including the flight ability, and unlike Mechanical Wings' 5 chance fall percent, anti-grav boots have a 0% fall chance. We can still fall when using swoop though. It also reduces our chance to get lost and gives us a travel speed bonus. The Mechanical Wings did that too, but to a lesser degree. Going into this challenge, my plan was to farm for the Gyrocopter backpack, which was somewhere in between with a 2% chance fall rate, but also took oil to run. Better, but not ideal, especially with the extra weight of the oil required to power it. But once I realized I actually could utilize the anti-grav boots, that became my mission. And after probably close to 10 hours of gameplay and getting to level 43, we can kind of at least move properly. And while we're on the subject of solving all the issues of our situation, let's talk about how we are going to go cave diving. In fact, let's test it out by doing a Joppa quest. I think it's about time. Maybe you figured it out by now, but my plan is to use Domination. It's extremely convenient that we got the mutation. Had we not, I would have had to grind for a ganglionic teleprojector, an extremely rare item that acts as a kind of weaker version of Domination that's limited to only robots. We'll also need at least 2 reprogrammable recoilers, which I've already found the data disk for, another item that was gated behind Tinker 2. At our current level, domination lasts for 900 rounds, which sounds like a lot, but there's much to be done underground, lots of fighting, and multiple strata to explore. The plan is such. First, we'll get a decently strong follower. This goat folk has been with me for quite a while now, so we'll use her as our test subject. We dominate and gear her up with the gear we've been collecting from vendor farming, and she's already gained quite a few levels with enough points to learn 4 mutations, but we'll hold off on that until after the experiment. She also has excellent stats, strength in particular, and for that reason I go with axes, but cudgels would have also been a good choice here. Now we need to go right outside of an underground entrance. We're using red rock here as our test area. Once there, we imprint 1 of the reprogrammable recoilers right there on the surface. We hand over both recoilers, then dominate. We enter the cave as the dominated follower and make as much progress before the domination timer runs out. Right before domination ends, maybe with a buffer of 100 turns or so for safety, we use the second recoiler to imprint the current location, essentially making a save point, then use the first recoiler to recoil back to the surface next to our original body. We let the domination run out, and then dominate again. Now, we use that second recoiler to recall back to the saved point, and then we just repeat the process, exploring as much as we can, making an imprint before time runs out, recoiling back, refresh the domination, and so on. It's a little messy, I'll admit, but it works. Red Rock was a success, and I probably could have gone down and returned without having to imprint with the second recoiler, but I decided to go all the way to the Ancient Bones to extend the test. The only hiccup was the fact that both recoilers had the exact same name, so I just added a mod to one of them so I can always differentiate. I also forgot to give my follower water, so I'll note that for next time. I next head to the Rust Wells to find an old man some various lengths of wire. This is an in and out job, and the kudzu are friendly. I'm guessing because they're friendly with Glowpads and by extension their followers, but whatever the reason, not having to worry about them rusting my gear is great. With 2 successful cave runs, we're now about to see if we can rush through the rest of the main quest. We're going to go straight to Golgotha first, break through the walls to get to the deep shaft by hand, as I forgot I actually did have a pickaxe, and give Ba our old pair of mechanical wings to survive the fall all the way to the mid-level floor. From here, I stupidly drop down into the next shaft and survive with a sliver of HP. Unfortunately, I run into Slog, who I didn't want to kill, but had no other choice. Slog does rust one of my recoilers, but not the one I need to escape, which could have potentially been very bad, but we quickly find the way droid and recoil out. Easiest Golgotha ever. From here, we can head straight to Gritgate. I first clear out the surface so nothing sneaks up on me while dominating. Giving Ba the spare blue security card makes for an easier time navigating through the random doors on the way. There are a lot of enemies, but they're quite weak, so I rush my way down and make it with plenty of turns left on the timer. I have to surface because I forgot to give Ba the way droid, but I buy a recoiler so it can easily come right back, then trade the way droid for the stamped data disk. Our next quest location is Bethesda Susa, and things are about to get much more difficult. As much as an asset Ba has been so far, we're going to need someone stronger. After considering my options, which yes, there are many, from wardens to walls and even doors, I decide to check in on what lairs we've uncovered so far, and this Isakari Raider lair draws my attention. Legendaries usually spawn with very high stats, and their level isn't usually too much higher than their non-legendary variance level, always 1.5 times to be exact. This is good, as Isakari are typically low level and low mental armor, both important stats for beguiling and domination. Inside the lair, I do find an extra dimensional saltback, which I just run from, and Love Tonic the legendary rifler. I proselytize her, and once the love sickness wears off, I water ritual for Isakari rep just in case, then I take a look at her stats. She's about half the level of Ba, but all of her stats are better, except strength, which only lags a few points behind. No skills, but starts with a decent amount of SP. Even after using 2 Schrodinger pages, I still don't have enough rep to dismiss Chokes by the Sun without Ba attacking. Yeah, Isakari names are egregious, so let's just call her Sunny. I temporarily solve this by leaving them both in separate tiles so I can go to town and do some shopping. Even after raising Isakari rep to 600 using Schrodinger pages, they still dislike me. I think it might have something to do with base rep, or how swap works, or something. A minor issue, but I do go ahead and change Sunny to my Beguiled character and decide to just leave Ba back home for now. Anyway, after having her turn in books, her stats are even more incredible, and we spend some mutation points buying triple jointed, two-headed, time dilation, and temporal fugue. Insane luck. I'm a bit torn on what weapons route to take. Longblade is appealing, but a bit micromanagey. Triple jointed would give us a slight advantage to Shortblade, but since we already have good axes, and I just found the Serrated mod, I continue Ba's Legacy using multi-weapon fighting with one-handed axes. Helping Hands would also be great at this point, but for now, we're ready to test our new minion's skill. Naturally, we have to clear out the surface first. It's all Cragmensch with high AV and HP and this extra-dimensional bone worm that catches itself in its own space-time vortex. Inside, the Cragmensch are slow, so I just walk past them. We first encounter Jotun, and to keep my limbs from being parted, I use Temporal Fugue to create some distraction clones so I can sneak up and attack. Next is Fjorn, who doesn't require any special strategies. I just use Fugue clones again for some added damage. As usual, I forget to bring away to detect Hagaba. I go back to the market to see if I can get lucky with night vision goggles, but no such luck, so I just fight an invisible enemy. The depths of Bethesda Susa aren't too difficult either. There are just a lot of enemies, and fighting them waste domination turns. I do get my face and arm cut off by a Sawhander, prompting me to use a precious Uber Nostrum injector, but after that it's smooth sailing the rest of the way. I'm able to get into the frozen spider's lair quite easily, as I've learned to always carry a pickaxe, and I simply walk past the cryogenics lab, though the rocket cannibal spawned is extra-dimensional. After looting the Mechanimist's underground temple and turning in the disc to complete the quest, I return to the surface and have Sunny give me her recently detached left face. I can wear it over my own face for +2 ego, good for proselytize attempts, though it does give me a -500 Isakari rep, so best not to wear it around them. With Bethesda Susa handled relatively easily, I'm feeling confident going into the next stretch of the main quest. On a side note, while doing some testing on another character, I found out that dominated creatures, upon the domination ending, either manually or by timer expiry, actually return to where they were first dominated. This means really I only need the one recoiler, but I'm still using 2 just in case of emergencies. Anyway, the next bit of main quest isn't too exciting. The summary is, I ask Asfidel to convene the council, which takes 3 days, so in the meantime I do some vendor farming, clean up my storage chests a bit, use my non-unspecific Schrodinger pages, and make sure I'm geared up, as I'm not sure what to expect from the next quest. What I do know is that I'll need to spend a lot of time down in Gritgate, so to prevent from having to repeatedly recoil when time runs out, I preemptively clear out the area 1 tile south and plant the Glowpad there by recoiler. It can now no longer move, but that's fine, it's only there to control Sunny, and I've also made it a habit to carry plenty of recoilers for exiting. In every playthrough, I usually just overclock the Chromelings and call it a day, and it's usually a disaster. This time I decide just to activate the turrets. I activated a few next to the front gate where the sensors showed that both parties would spawn. As I walked away to activate some more turrets just in case the fighting spilled out, the pop-up appeared telling me that the quest had been completed. Now I think I got lucky with RNG and the composition of the spawned war parties and what gear they spawned in with, but I'm definitely going to be utilizing the chain turrets more in the future. And because the turrets did all of the killing, I didn't take any negative Putus Templar rep for killing the legendary that spawns in with them. This was a battle that I was a little worried about, but it was over in seconds. However, we're now nearing the final few quests of the game, and there's still plenty of challenges ahead. For now though, we have some downtime, as the next bit of questline is mostly pretty chill. Go to the Rainbow Wood, eat some mysterious fungi, trip out, follow a yellow brick road, and spread some spores around Qud for a talking mushroom. Also, it can help us build a giant robot. That robot will be glorious, but first we have one more major dungeon to get through, the Tomb of the Eaters. The main gimmick of this dungeon is the recall bell, which will teleport us if we're not in a save zone when the bell chimes once every 300 turns. This, plus the many traps that have to be carefully navigated through, isn't ideal, as many turns can be wasted just getting through one zone, and our domination is on a strict timer. For this reason, I opt not to give myself the mark of death. I don't like the recall mechanic to begin with, so I usually skip the mark in regular playthroughs, but here skipping is even more useful. The downside is the otherwise neutral servitor enemies are now hostile, and this is actually a bigger problem than I thought it would be. While Sunny can take down a servitor, they have a ton of HP and can deal a lot of damage. The combined amount of turns that it takes to kill one, plus the amount of turns it takes to heal, pretty much negates the turns we're saving by not being recalled. Since we're right next to Ezra, I can eat from the oven to gain psychometry and learn how to craft tier 3 freeze grenades. I only have enough bits to craft a handful, but they seem to take care of the servitor problem for now. Freeze them and then run. The trap rooms aren't too bad, as the conveyor belts mostly help us quickly pass through. There are some scary enemies in the upper crypt areas, but I play it safe. Thankfully, it doesn't take too long to find the Sultan tombs. Upon entering, I now apply the Mark of Death so that the cherubim aren't hostile, except that they are. And they're too powerful to run from or defeat. So what now? Well, technically, this area, in fact most of the tomb, is above ground, and the Glowpad can indeed fly freely here. So I mark the Glowpad and recoil in, but now there's a new problem. Due to the constant astral burden effect applied just by being in the tombs, electronic devices often fail. This includes the one allowing our Glowpad to even be able to fly. So I get, on average, maybe 1 to 2 steps before falling, having to wait for the cooldown and having to tap fly several times before the device responds. I mean, just look at this. This is exactly like the mechanical wings, except 10 times worse. And there's something like 30 zones to get through here. I do have a plan, but for now I struggle my way to the first room, and of course the cherubim are not hostile to me, or Sunny as a follower. I proselytize them, which allows me to attack without consequence and take them out using this method one by one. But we don't take the Kessel face just yet. If you break the glass and go 1 zone south, the astral field dissipates, so you can reliably use recoilers. I set a recall point here, then dominate Sunny to climb all the way to the top tomb. The cherubim now, as expected, are not hostile. I don't have quite enough turns to take Sunny all the way, but with some recoiler cycling, I'm able to finally get both of them to the top, claiming the Kessel face before moving on, and using the recoiler to bypass the cherubim that would in fact be hostile to our grave robbing. Now our journey could end here in what the game refers to as a lesser victory, but I certainly wouldn't be satisfied with that, nor would our Glowpad. There is much left to do, so I choose to continue the journey. We die, but are able to return to Qud, and it's here that we have another unforeseen roadblock. When you return to Qud, all of your items are removed and put in a chest. The chest is 1 tile away, and we have no way to access this chest from here. Our means of locomotion are inside said chest. If we had teleport or even the wings mutation, this wouldn't be an issue. I could juke or be knocked back if there were enemies around, but alas. It feels very frustrating to solve the logistics of climbing the Eater's Tomb only to have progress halted by 1 tile. But before resorting to wishes, I do have some ideas. See, I had previously left Sunny behind back at the Goatfolk base, as I wasn't sure what would happen to a follower after entering the tomb, and I also made a backup save before entering, just in case something like this happened. So I loaded up the save to see what would happen if instead let Sunny continue to follow me, and, well, it almost worked. Sunny showed up, but she came in hostile, guns blazing. If she would only come within melee range, I might be able to beguile her. So I reloaded the save once more, and this time took all of her gear, especially any ranged gear. And after recoming yet again, it worked. It's actually a good thing that she's hostile, as if she were friendly, she might not have ever gone in my direction. Except I accidentally beguiled her temporal fugue clone and didn't have the HP to withstand the barrage until the next cooldown, so I had to reload and sit through the cutscene a 4th time, but we finally get everything back to normal. I head back to the base, get our gear sorted, cry, and prepare myself for the next task, which will hopefully put our struggles to an end. In normal playthroughs, I usually don't put much thought into the golem. I tend to overlevel by this point, at which it's not worth babysitting a follower. For this playthrough, however, a well-crafted golem will make a world of difference. If you're unfamiliar, the golem is made of several different parts that you get to choose, each part giving it significantly differing attributes. First, we need a body. This has to be a follower who is above level 30. I considered using Ba, as Goatfolk bases have great stats, but instead decide to go for a Scorpiok, and you'll see why soon. Though I did have to raise the Scorpiox level to 30, this wasn't that hard with the book farm that we've already set up. For the catalyst, I used 3 drams of Convalescence, which gives our golem the regen mutation at level 10, great for survivability. For the incantation, I took the one that gives 3 extra limbs, as these are always limbs with natural weapons when the base body can allow it. As for the armament, well, it's a bit of a sad story. I wanted the Zetachrome Halberd, but only after farming high-tier vendors for 2 hours without seeing it, did I realize that the only difference from the Zetachrome Battle Axe, which I already have, wouldn't even apply here. So I just went with the Battle Axe. This gives the golem the entire axe skill line and makes all of our natural weapons axes. For the Atmos and Hamsa, I was tempted to go for an Astral Tabby part paired with Phase Harmonic Modulator implant, which would essentially allow us to have permanent toggleable phasing. Instead, I decided to use a Rhinox part, which gives us 2 extra heads with horns for a total of 6 extra weapons. There's a guaranteed Rhinox spawn in the Bethesda Susa Cryo Labs, so I head back there and have Sunny wake it up and use Dismember, and we acquire its precious body part. Had I the forethought, I would have placed a recoil point here the first time around, but alas. For the Hamsa, I'll admit this is not the best option, but I just took an item that gives plus 800 skill points. This is because I'll want to max out the Golem's multi-weapon fighting skill, which takes skill points, but the Golem is created at level 50, and leveling up at that level can be a chore. Yes, I could farm more books or complete the Bay Law quest, but I don't really want to do either of those things. If I were less lazy, I probably would have just done the Astral thing, but this is good enough. For the final component, power, we're just going to ignore the whole chiming crystal tree thing and use the 3 drams of neutron flux I just happen to have lying around. I have Sunny set up a recoil point right in front of where I need to be to place the parts, then tuck her away safely and recoil in with the Scorpioc to avoid any weird follower bugs. And behold, the Spider Golem. The Glowpad is no longer restricted to the limitations of its own body. So, what exactly have we made? Well, despite not being the best possible, this golem still has incredible stats. The mental stats might be relatively weak, but they're not really as important. What is important is the weapons. The Scorpioc body provides 8 legs, each an axe. Each head, including the ones granted from the Rhinox, grants a trine, also an axe, and an antler. Though the antlers are weaker, they're still a nice bonus as they're cudgels with Day's chance on crit. I think that the weapon type on extra limbs from the incantation are random, and if they are, we got really lucky as all 3 are axes. And with a total of 17 weapons, you can see why we wanted multi-weapon fighting mastery, which I max out first thing, and use the rest of the skill points to take the cudgel passes. Oh, and we also get the Rhinox's charge ability, which can actually be pretty devastating. And of course, regeneration. For a bit of testing, I decided to go back to the Tomb of Eaters. Those conservators that took Sunny several hits and more than half of her HP to take down, yeah, we're one-shotting them now. The only issue is that health and defense is a little lacking, and armor is pretty rare for golems, but I think if we're careful, we should have no problem. It's also worth mentioning that the Glowpad can in fact fly inside the golem's cockpit even while underground, so as long as the golem is always with us, we'll never be stuck. The golem doesn't, however, have access to any of the Glowpad's items, so my options are to either get out and recoil as the Glowpad every time, or give my recoilers to the golem, but because the golem doesn't have any wayfaring skills, it gets lost when traversing the overworld, so it's better to just let the Glowpad lead the way until the golem is needed. Yeah, just wanted to remind you that there's still an element of logistics for moving around. Anyway, there's really only one thing left to do. We scoop up Barathrum the Old and head for the Spindle, but the Putus Templar aren't going to make things easy for us. We enter the Spindle grounds where the battle is already taking place. I take out the first legendary commander with little effort, but Scorpioc falls. Sunny is wounded due to an extended fight with a phylactery hologram, as it took me a while to find the hiding little biznatch controlling it. I take out another legendary in Ezra as I hear the Gersh Nephilim spawn. We'll deal with that later. We continue to the east side, which is mostly quiet. There's a Gao that I'm able to one-shot before it does any harm. Sunny is holding her own surprisingly well, taking out lesser enemies with ease. Next I find the legendary Mecha. and this one gave me a bit of trouble. It liked to get the jump on me from halfway across the map, casting time dilation and or stun locking me long enough to completely destroy the golem and take out half of the Glowpad's remaining HP. So yeah, I had to reload a few times. I was prepared to leave the battlegrounds to re-strategize, doing so would have reset the entire battle. In the end, I just had to get lucky and shake off a stun before it killed the golem. From there, I detonated an EMP from my inventory. It doesn't affect the golem, but it completely shuts down the mech, at which point victory was easy. Speaking of easy victory, we find the third commander to the north. Shortly after, though, tragedy strikes. Sunny is mentally obliterated, which I imagine is quite painful. We don't have time to mourn, however. The final commander is just to the west, but beyond him waits the real threat. I enter the zone to the southwest, and there it is. Quite possibly the worst of the random Gersh that could have spawned. We get Khan. Simply being in the presence of Khan causes confusion. It's possible to use a Sphinx Salt injector to resist the confuse effect, but I'm not sure if I have one or if it even works on golems, and I don't want to waste the turns to find out. I head towards Khan. Fighting while confused isn't the most difficult thing, but I soon realize the other issue: Khan is flying. This golem cannot fly. The best I can do is swat at the air and hope that she falls. A 14% chance. Until then, I somehow have to avoid being killed, not knowing exactly where her beam will be fired. Eventually, she falls, but by then, my health is extremely low. I eat an herberry and have just enough time for another attack before she powers up her beam. This is it, I have one turn. The next will kill my golem, so I say a prayer to Reshef and make one final attack, and with it, Khan falls. The battle is over. And though we lost 2 companions, 1 old friend, and 1 newer member, I feel that finishing the fight, defeating the Templar, and the Nephilim have avenged their deaths, at least a little bit. Anyway, it's time to move on. Normally these battlegrounds would offer bounty of spoils from the bodies of fallen Templar, but the Glowpad has no need for that, or anything else. The Glowpad has one mission: to ascend. It had been its mission from the very beginning, to become more than what it was before, and that path has led it to a literal ascension in the form of the spindle that the Glowpad now makes its way towards. The Glowpad enters the graphene ribbon and begins the ascent. On the way, the only remaining companion, Barathrum the Old, insists on exposition. His brain seems addled, and he speaks of gloom and doom, some kind of divine purge delivered unto Qud. It mostly sounds like nonsense, but he mentions something else, something about a star sheeb? Interesting. The rest of the long trip up the spindle takes place in silence, giving the Glowpad time to think. Once at the top, they all step out. The old man mumbles something, but the Glowpad pays no mind, stepping forward into this wondrous place. It notices the old man walking past, picking up his pace. The Glowpad wonders if the old man has the same idea. The Glowpad quickens its own step, and so does Barathrum. He is old, and the Glowpad, with the help of its anti-grav boots, quickly overtake him. Up the stairs, to the right, leads to the next room in this mysterious place, the old man losing distance with every step, giving his best effort to keep up nonetheless. The Glowpad has never been here before, but something is calling out. Somehow the strange glyphs and lights are pointing it in the right direction. The Glowpad follows and enters a strange kind of elevator. The ride somehow drains the anti-grav boots of its batteries. Replacing them takes time, but Barathrum is nowhere to be seen. Onward. This next room has platforms leading down to starships. The Glowpad tries a few platforms that lead to dead ends, but the final platform leads to a small ship that seems to be in working order. The Glowpad heads back up for its golem, but the golem is too big to enter the platform. The Glowpad hesitates for a moment. There had been much loss, and now even the golem would have to be left behind. Who, even though couldn't think for itself, was the closest thing to a friend the Glowpad had left. Memories came pouring in. Memories of the Mechanimous Pilgrim, the Puma, the several goat folk, of Ba and Sunny, even the Scorpiok, and now the golem. Maybe, the Glowpad thought, things would be better off if it wasn't around to force others to do its bidding. They had helped it get this far. Perhaps it's time to handle things on its own from here on out. It takes one last look down the corridor, no Barathrum, one last long look at the golem, and then descends to the platform one last time. It enters in the launch sequence, which comes surprisingly intuitively, and after a short countdown, the Glowpad once bound by its inability to even move, is now bound by nothing, not even the vast expanse of space. So there you have it. Caves of Qud beaten with a Glowpad. Of course, I didn't get the best possible ending. Besides just fighting all the Gersh Nephilim and achieving a greater victory, there are still many things that could have been done, but this'll have to do. My goal was simply to beat the game in any way possible, and I succeeded, and am quite happy with how things turned out. I do have a few post-run thoughts to reflect on. I didn't talk about it much because it slowed the game way down, but the mechanical wings broke a lot. It got so bad I was saving almost every time I came upon a ruin or an enemy-filled map, as more area to cover meant more chances to fall, meaning more chances to break. If you maybe got the flight mutation as one of your first mutations, or found the gyrocopter backpack early and a good source of fuel such as an oil weep, you'd have a much less frustrating time. But even with the anti-grav boot strategy, which I just so happened to have stumbled upon while looking up unrelated stuff on the Qud wiki, enemies can still knock you prone, and you still have a fall chance when attacking, and it's not insignificant. Of course, overcoming this challenge was kind of the whole point of the run, but I never found a solution that completely solved it, and I don't think there is one. Tapping into vendor proselytizing as early as possible made things much more bearable, as the XP grinding was by far the worst part of the run. Without proselytizing Bookbinders, I potentially could have spent many more hours grinding. I went in not expecting to get domination at all. If I hadn't gotten it by level 50, I don't think I would have pushed much more, as my original plan was to just use a ganglionic teleprojector. This would have made the run go in a very different route. There aren't really a lot of good robot options except for the extremely high level ones like the Leering Stalker and Chrome Pyramid, so the challenge would potentially be much harder. I was hoping for the Wings mutation more than anything, especially within the first few mutations, but never got it, though I suppose that it really only would have saved our floating nearby slot. Beguile was quite lucky, though I didn't realize how important it would be at the time I took it. Without it, I only would have had Proselytize to work with, which has a much harder check to pass, though Beguile can be granted with food. That said, cooking is one aspect of the game I'm not as familiar with, and there are most definitely instances which could have been made easier with cooking. And about that Reclamation fight, I really cannot stand those phylactery guys who like to hide in the corner. The worst part is that the holograms can chase you to other screens. I couldn't find the Squire, the ones who you have to kill to disable the holograms, so I tried to just outrun their holograms. Sunny, however, got caught up fighting them, and that's how she died. Totally unfair, but that's Qud sometimes. The Golem I made was almost verbatim one of the top Google searches for best Golem build in Qud, and it is indeed a very good general build. However, I think for the context of challenge runs, it might be better to focus on attributes that make the Reclamation fight easier, something to keep in mind for future runs. And there are no doubt many other strategies I could have used. This game has many interactions, some obscure, some better known, and I don't claim to know them all, quite the opposite. I used what I did know to bring together a run that, in my opinion, was incredibly interesting, and I hope you found it interesting as well. I'm not sure if I'd recommend this challenge to everyone. I imagine it's pretty painful, even with good RNG luck. Anyway, that's about all I got. If anyone ever wanted to know if you can beat Caves of Qud with a Glowpad, well, there's your answer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Live and drink.